Hi, my name is Yana. I'm a modern ajumma. I had probably the best reading month of my entire life. I also read a lot of books, so I have a lot to cover in this video that I really hope will be, I always say this every month, one of the shortest vids that I will ever upload. I don't know why I tell myself that when all of my monthly wrap-ups tend to be around the 45 to an hour mark, and every time I'm hoping yeah, let's throw up a 20-minute video for the month. Why not? let's just get into the great books that I read this month. As always, if you've read any of these, please let me know in the comments what you thought about them, because things are about to get opinionated. No lipstick in my teeth. Let's just get this out of the way first. Oh my god. It did not take me very long to quickly fall in love after reading 4 of these Williams Sonoma Kitchen Library books when I borrowed 4 from the library in the month of May, and I quickly accumulated, how many of these do I have? Lucky number 13 of these books. More to come. I mostly bought these from thriftbooks.com. However, I have seen a couple of them, not in the greatest of conditions, at my local thrift stores. So if you happen to see any of these and I don't have that title, this is the first time when I'm sending out a please send me a free book type of call to action. But I love these guys. I'm not going to talk about every single one of these, but just for example, chicken is just one of those cookbooks where if you go, what is for dinner tonight? Pick a random page and lemon chicken it is, hun. I just really appreciate first of all, the size of these books, the format, the square format that leads to a full page photo on one side and the recipe on the other side contained to the page. Soups was another great one. Random page. Ooh, cold cream of cucumber with dill and yogurt. You know what? I wouldn't eat every single recipe found in these books, but there we go. Quick vegetable soup. It's recipes like these that ultimately are just comforting. You know what they are. There's no my grandma's 40-year recipe for leek and potato soup that when I was 7 years old, there's no story, there's no rambling. It's just a recipe for a dish that you are familiar, if not extremely familiar with. And there's no bells and whistles, but everything is done really well. And ultimately, it's just been super comforting for me to read through these, to plan menus, and kind of fantasize about the people in the 90s when these were coming out, on the things that they ate and enjoyed in their lives. I feel like I'm part of history. I'm gonna love looking at my collection for the rest of my life. The consistency and the formatting within these books, where it starts with the intro. I love the equipments page every time. And then basic prep and simple recipes for things like sauces that are included in every single one pertaining to their subject. I'm gonna proudly show off my stack once more to show what my collection is made up of at this point in time. And I hope to acquire the rest. Yes, there are more than these, and they're all gonna be mine. I'm so excited. Oh my god. Every month I've been endeavoring to make a dent into my Penguin Littles collection, as well as to read a piece of poetry every month. And so my piece of poetry for this month was John Keats' The Eve of St. Agnes, which was really delightful, I have to say. It has these poems within. And last month I read the Walt Whitman Penguin Little, which I really didn't like. It was my first Walt Whitman ever, and I just felt too much of the man on him, and so I disliked it. But for John Keats, I found it so beautiful, really lovely. I think I wrote in my Goodreads review for this, is John Keats the REI to Walt Whitman's Bass Pro Shops? Yeah, I'm sticking to that. La Belle Dame sans Merci, is that what it was? The ballad is so elegantly horny, her soothed limbs and soul fatigued away, blinded alike from sunshine and from rain, as though a rose should shut and be a bud again. This is actually my very first taste of John Keats. There's a movie called Bright Star, which I've always really liked, and I honestly don't know what it makes me think of Keats's writing, because as for the man himself, it seems like it was complicated. As far as the film is regarded, I think it's lovely, gorgeous. So in that sense, I'm getting that what the movie was trying to achieve is not just telling like the tragic love story between John Keats and the woman in his life, but like that ephemeral quality and the beauty of his writing. I think that came across, even for people who are unfamiliar with Keats's poetry. So yes, this book did exactly what its job is pertaining to be, I think, where it gives you a taste of the writer, gives you an appetite for more. So I can't wait to read all of John Keats, I suppose. And then I read Ralph Ellison's The Black Ball. You guys, this month had the best Penguin Littles selections. These contain these 4 short stories. I loved all of them. All of them speak on the theme of racism in our racist world, the pain that it inflicts. This is so far the best Penguin Little that I've read. I have not yet read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I know that's his big novel. I can't wait to now. Fried Hands. Once a bull hit me across the bridge of my nose and I felt like I was coming apart like a cigarette floating in a urinal. Yeah, really, 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 really good. I read Vallet by Charlotte Bronte this month because of the Ben Reads Good challenge. It was the reading shame month, like read a book that I felt ashamed I haven't read yet. And for me, that was Vallet this month. It's a book that I've been meaning to read because I've said that I've been meaning to read this for years now. And I finally just did it. First of all, this Penguin cloth-bound edition is stunning. It's one of my favorites. I think that's why I really wanted to read this, because I've always admired the spine and the color choices, like this lemon yellow. I absolutely die over against this pastel teal, and who doesn't love a good Bronte, especially during the summer? So I was so prepared to love this. I know that some of my favorite booktubers, just book content creators, just book lovers in general, praise Vallet, have so many interesting things to say about this, and I know that you feel it coming. I did this too with Middlemarch. I'm not having a great record on these new to me classics reading experience in this stage of my life. I did not understand the hype. I mean, I guess I kind of do. The hype is for Vallet, which is a story about Lucy Snow, who has more or less come down upon this world, and she has to work for a living, and she's surrounded by richer people who are just really mean to her. And it's over 500 pages of so many womp womps, at least as far as I'm concerned. And then what makes it even more challenging to really like this book, to have any sort of positive feelings of, relatability or sympathy for Lucy or for this book in general. Lucy is the central figure, and her own attitude towards life is very, I wouldn't say so far as Daria, but it is very cold, very neutral. I was gonna say it's neither hot nor cold, but it is actually very cold. And so I was all set for a hot summer big book about a strong independent woman, a la Jane Eyre, which is Charlotte Bronte's most famous title. And I love Jane Eyre. I love Jane as a character. First of all, because Jane just made me laugh so hard every time she spiraled so hard in her agony over her man. But Lucy doesn't do that. Lucy is very if no one wants me, that's fine. I can do this on my own. I'm fine. When, clearly she's not fine. So because of that consistency in character, I just didn't feel much for Lucy Snow. Just like in Middlemarch, I felt that coming from Dorothea, who is the central female character of Middlemarch. I didn't have feelings for Dorothea either. There's also the main male figure in this is named Graham, Dr. John Graham something, and I've, for whatever reason, have always been very biased against men named Graham. Especially if you say it in the British way, which is you emphasize that H in the name, Graham, Graham. I don't know. I just don't get it. Both the love for this story and for the name Graham. So just like with Middlemarch, I do feel perhaps this just was not the time to read them. Perhaps it was always meant to be that my first time reading these titles, I would feel this way about them. And therefore, I'm very open to rereading both titles at a later point in my life. Perhaps I will always feel this way about those titles because it's just who I am, but I'm willing to find out and investigate further. But honestly, you guys, the main thought that I had for Vallet is like, when I watched Anora for the first time, I loved Anora so much. I couldn't understand the hate that it was getting, like, against the substance, because they were head-to-head during the award season. And then it came out, like, these stories started coming out from real strippers, from real women in the industry that the movie speaks about and speaks for, who said that they hated Anora. And I was like, what? Why? Who can hate Anora? And essentially, like, what those women were criticizing for Anora was that Anora was just too sad for them. I think what they're saying is it's such a pessimistic, negative take on their industry and their lives, and that's not who they look up to. So in that vein, I'm wondering if I'm a stripper and I am seeing Lucy Snow and going like, I disagree. I don't like that tone of women. And that take just makes me feel like such a dum-dum, but maybe emotionally I am at that level. I don't know. That's seriously like the smartest cognizant thought I have for Vallet. Yeah, I can't wait to like grow some and then like revisit and see what all these other, what I think are incredibly smart women are feeling for Lucy and for this book. You know what? Sometimes you just gotta own up to your feelings and own up to who you are and where you are. So June was so much fun because I read, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 BookTube darlings. Let's just talk about the biggest one probably, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I read this as a library audio read by Helen Laser, and I just found this to be so campy, so much fun, not at all to be taken seriously. And honestly, I just started reading it because I was randomly caught somewhere outside without a book to read when I had to wait for stuff. And it was like an available skip the line book. And it's not short per se, but I blew through this because it was so entertaining and fun, done in a smart way. I thought that Kuang packed a lot of thought-provoking topics like cancel culture, cultural appropriation, white entitlement in a very zippy, fast-paced takedown of the publishing industry. And she was naming names. Like, she had her main character get popular so fast. She mistook her book for one of Sally Rooney's. Like, I was cackling. And even the main character, like her whole characterization, that whole unreliable main character trope, who you love to hate, whose string of incredibly poor life choices just kept me snort-lolling and has become one of my favorite unreliable narrator characters I've read in recent memory. Like, her fantasies, her expectations are so childish and delusional. I just really liked how every move was so predictable, and then the inevitable crashes weren't dulled down by simply being mean to this bozo Karen character. And instead, what Kuang did was to use that to highlight the larger issue at hand, which, you know, like the question of who should write what narrative. Is it really your manuscript if others had a part in creating it? I thought that was super interesting. The movie The Social Network explores that extremely dramatically. This explores that question in satire. This book is what I should have turned to when I was looking for a comfort read from all those Williams Sonomas. Yeah, I like this a lot. I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, translated by Rose Schwartz, and there's an afterword written by Sophie McIntosh, and I did a double take when I saw that this book came out in 1995. I read this as a library book, which I had to return. This was so immersive, like genre bending. Is this horror? Is this sci-fi? Is this whatever it is? It was reflective AF. I'm going to talk about Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont later, which I summed up in my Goodreads review. Like, is that all there is? Oh my God. If Mrs. Palfrey was asking, is that all there is? This book is asking, what's it all for? which I loved so much. This book is one of those books that I absolutely love, that is a quick read, but it gets me feeling all sorts of things, full of wonder about the meaning and value of life. Like when someone is singing and she's looking up at the sky and seeing the sunset colors, hearing music for the first time. Oh, that was really swoony. The concept of bathroom privacy being so treasured. Yeah, I thought this was beautiful. I thought this was ephemeral. I thought this was harrowing. It wasn't her body that was giving up, but her spirit, which had grown increasingly weary of animating those muscles, of making that heartbeat, of going through all the motions of living, the spirit that nothing had nourished for such a long time, that had watched its sisters die, and that had for its only companion a woman who disliked her and whom she disliked. How tragic, I said to myself, how tragic. I was perfectly aware that I had only added another question to all the others, but it was a new one, and in the absurd world in which I lived, and still live, that was happiness. I felt a surge of grief, I, who had never known men, as I stood in front of this man who had wanted to overcome fear and despair, to enter eternity upright and furious. Yeah, really, really lovely. I read Audition by Katie Kitamura. Again, is a library book that I had to return before filming this video. But oh, this is so beautiful. This felt like the elegant glide in a waltz, going through all the turns and transitions and all the nuances of emotions, experiences. She used the word ossified. I was got. This is my first Katie Kitamura. I'm so intrigued. I want to read the rest of her books. I've heard so many good things. I definitely get why. This book felt like reading a Criterion Collection film. But above all, I was completely enchanted by the writing, the elevation of it all. I would definitely performatively read this in public. She's become one of my new favorite writers, like instantly. It doesn't matter like what the plot is. There is some plot in this, but what's most important here is the vibe. It's the vibes. Like Kitamura just deftly spins you around and lets you feel what you feel while simultaneously putting you exactly where you should be. And I just think that that's a skill that good writers have. Yeah, I'm so impressed. People always talked about having children as an event, as a thing that took place. They forgot that not having children was also something that took place. That is to say, it wasn't a question of lack. It had its own presence in the world. It was its own event. His astonishment had the force of a slap in the face. It startled me awake, and I was made to understand that it had been a long time since I had performed even so small an act of kindness. I wondered if, after all, he might pass through the world as he was, rather than as we feared he needed to be. Belton, a new booktuber, yay, welcome, highlighted this quote in one of his videos. I couldn't agree more. This hit me so hard. What was a family if not a shared delusion, a mutual construction? And I read Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, translated by Sophie Hughes. This is super big right now because it's like nominated for an award or something. I don't know those types of things. I'm not an award watcher for books, at least. And I stan. At first, it felt like a bingo card of millennialisms, like a BuzzFeed checklist of a novel. This is also another book that's like more vibe than plot. And in the beginning, I had thoughts like, I don't wear enough Carhartt to enjoy this. Do people genuinely like LCD sound system? Like it's not just background noise for them? I still kind of think that. Because they have LCD sound system in vinyl. I'm like, what? And then by the end, I realized it's really more of like a Rorschach test of culture, like a mirror to who you truly are. Like I wanted to approach this book snarky, you know, like imagine spending your whole life never figuring it out, living in delusion, wondering why it's never feeling right. But couldn't we say that about ourselves, about anybody? No one has it figured out as much as they appear to be. I really, really, really liked what CJ said in her Goodreads review for this book. I also agree with that assessment. Intensely disoriented, they will find themselves unable to disentangle one from the other, and this, their sudden inability to access a version of their past unfiltered by nostalgia, will be their understanding of nostalgia. Yeah, I also like this a lot. So for whatever reason, the month of June had me like in love with David Grann. I read these 3 books, including The Old Man and the Gun, which I read as a Libby audio, I think. Yes, read by Mark Deakins. I love David Grann. I just knew that I would like him. I remember seeing the film for The Lost City of Z and felt like really enchanted by it. I want to say it's because of the director, because I really do like James Gray a lot. And so like reading this story was such a trip. This is like animal trauma porn. There's a lot of bugs in this. I mean, it's the Amazon. But I really like The Lost City of Z. And then like reading Killers of the Flower Moon. Oh my gosh, this is like what broke me this month in the best possible way, you know, like from a really good book that just breaks you with its truth. I still haven't seen the film, and at this point I don't know if I ever will, because I just can't let my brain acknowledge that like these types of truly evil people in the world exist and are at large and in charge of the country. But there's so much hype around Killers of the Flower Moon. I totally, completely, utterly add my own hat to that opinion, and I highly recommend everybody to read this book, if not for enjoyment, but just to know that this happened. And then I saw The Wager, which is like his most recent book, in my library store that I got for a song, and I was so enthralled by this 18th century shipwreck tale. And it just concluded to me that David Grann is so good at bringing history to life and devastating me with the inescapable reality of it, the reality of capitalism throughout time, no matter how privileged or civilized. Oh my god, shipworms. Unsterilized surgical tools. And then The Old Man and the Gun was a little bit of a womp womp at the end. I just found this available as a Libby audiobook and wanted more David Grann in my life in the same month. These are like a few articles. I have to assume that what these are not short stories, but like former articles in like the New Yorker or something that he just compiled into one book. But you know, I didn't really mind. I really enjoy reading an entire oeuvre to see their DNA in all of their work, get a sense of their ultimate theme, which in David Grann's case, it is a stoic but nonetheless sympathetic current of humanism, unearthing the depths of the human soul in struggle. I saw that this is a film adaptation and directed by David Lowery, so I have to see that in my imminent future. I can already feel like the neither here nor there straightforward liminality. Let's just keep going with the nonfictions that I read. I read How to Raise an Adult, Break Free of the Overparenting Trap and Prepare Your Kid for Success by Julie Lythcott-Hames, as a Libby audio read by the author, which again, I did a double take seeing that this book came out in 2015. I'm still mulling over this one, to be honest. Like at first, I very much wanted to blast this on megaphones from my house so that like my entire town can hear. But I realized I needed to hear this too. It's all about like how to teach your kids independence, not do everything for them. So I guess in that sense, it should be read by all parents or overparented kids who can now articulate their feelings, people who complain about why people are the way that they are because they're probably overparented or they're overparenting. I did genuinely like this because I generally like the overall message being you gotta let the fuck go in fiction or nonfiction. But I do have to caveat that this book is definitely more for like parents of privilege, people who can afford to have these types of problems. Yeah, the reason why I did a double take in the 2015 publishing date is like, if this call for concern came from 10 years ago, oh boy, has it doubled, if not tripled, if not tenfolded by now. And I guess what I liked the most about this book is the whole idea, the whole concept of like wanting something better for your kids and then labeling that as part of the problematic thinking. And it's important even without bringing up anything about privilege or class or wealth, because it indirectly implies that's all relative to each individual and that nothing should be derived from nepotism in a healthy society. Yes, more of that. A critical part of parenting is knowing where you end and where your child begins. Non-anxious observation is so important. Wonder is their reward. I definitely recommend this book if you've ever had any of these concerns, complaints. Definitely gave me a lot of insight. I read Hunger by Roxane Gay. I own the book, but I also read the Libby audio because it was read by the author, and I just found that to be a must. It's just one of those books that you have to shut up and sit down for, that you have to hear from her own voice, which she reads wonderfully. For the audio, it's not about answers, it's not about solutions, but their experience is what's the value. This is the incredibly sad, but unfortunately very common tale about a young girl who was raped and it ruining the rest of her life and affected every single aspect, primarily her weight. The whole concept of not wanting to be objectified, not wanting her body to appear in a pleasing way, part of the reason behind like looking a certain way, it still gives me such a mind fuck, and something that I also fall prey to be honest. Another book that I found to be incredibly important that everyone should read. I also kind of consider this to be a booktube darling for good reason. Also throw this in the ring as well. Another horrific story of a lady injuring her ankle. I was broken, and then I broke my ankle and was forced to face a lot of things I had long ignored. I was forced to face my body and its frailty. I was forced to stop and take a breath and give a damn about myself. Even though it's very sad, it's still very easy and fast to read. It's not terribly long. I find this to be a great summer book to read, you know, like when we're all like, you know, thinking about beach bods and like getting caught up in ourselves. Yeah, let this be a reminder. Oh, Tofu wants up. Let this be a reminder that that's not what's the most important, and that this is also something to consider too. I read I'm Laughing Because I'm Crying, a memoir by Youngmi Mayer. I got the library book, and I also got the Libby audio because it was, again, read by the author. Whenever it's a memoir and I see that it's available as an audio read by the author, I always try to experience that as well. And Mayer is great. Is a wonderful author, wonderful narrator. Highly recommend either format of reading experience. I love this. This is probably the most accurate, like, Korean voice. I found every story to be so resonant, like deftly weaving in historical context, speaking of inherent tension of childhood and adapting to cultural norms while sounding totally natural and true to life. Like there's a detail of her grandmother at her husband's deathbed, and she's telling him like she's never loved him. Even before Mayer explained that story, I instantly knew what she was talking about, because it is something within Korean culture. Because if you admit to liking something, you're running the risk of losing that something, of having it be taken away from you. The trauma of being raised by childish parents. And she just speaks to the universal truth, regardless of culture, that being the first to laugh at yourself absolves all. I had no idea who Youngmi Mayer is, so therefore I had no idea that she was married to Danny Bowen and had the Mission Chinese food restaurant fame. What an incredible life that she's had. I think this and Trevor Noah's Born a Crime are the best celebrity memoirs that I've read thus far. And Mayer bringing the lesser known perspective of Korean culture to the Korean experience, the key to which is her half-white state. Same with Trevor Noah is, you know, like the whole outsider looking in perspective is really what makes this book so good and allows them to provide that broader view of the culture, of the society at large. And personally, growing up, I was always really turned off by Korean variety shows. Like, I just thought it was really juvenile, dumb. The incessant games I found really annoying. But Mayer's interpretation of the Norbu, like the village idiot trope, left me stunned. I take it back. I was bringing my own colonized bias and blanketing anything non-Western as primitive and inferior, and I was so very, very wrong. I'm really grateful for this book to kind of reframe my thinking and give me a new tool of looking back on my life and the things that I've learned. Another important book. I highly recommend this. I read Paris in Ruins, Love, War, and the Birth of Impressionism by Sebastian Smee because I do this thing where I can't be the only one, browse around Barnes and Noble and I just see like titles on shelves, and then instead of buying the book at the bookstore, I look on my phone in my Libby and see if it's available as like an audio or an ebook or like in physical form at the library. So that's why I read this. I really like reading about art and art history. I've read quite a few good ones this year so far, and I'm also going to Paris later this year, so I just figured, yeah, let's do it. You know, this is not like a short read by any means, but I did find this interesting with several merits. Primarily that, like, you think of these impressionist painters like Manet, Degas, Morisot, and you see, I don't know if you can see, the lighting is starting to go, but you see these like gentle paintings and you think their lives must have been so nice. They must have lived in halcyon frivolity. It's just what we'd like to assume after seeing their beautiful paintings. But no, because their youths happened to take place in the year 1870, which was a very violent, horrendous year for Paris, where there was a political war going on with the Prussians, which meant there were things like rat markets and carrier pigeon hunting and just thousands of Frenchmen being killed in battle. I always knew that the region Alsace was very sticky in terms of like, is it French or is it German? I learned that this war is what split it. I found this to be pretty immersive, but most of all, like a very different take on historical context of these artists than anything that I had in my art history education. Like, I just recall the reason given for why the Impressionists left the salon to create their own. And in summation, it's like, because politics. Oh my God. In a nutshell, yeah. I also happened to be reading this book during the LA ICE protests in my area, which brought another layer to this reading experience. The relationship between art and life had been turned upside down. Theater, make-believe, and imagination had been co-opted and traduced, switched out for propaganda and for death. If you're into art history, I do recommend this. If anything, you'll find it interesting. And to cap off my long list of nonfics that I read this month, I read Barracon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo by Zora Neale Hurston, which came out in 2018, but it was not written in 2018. It was written in like the mid 1900s, which, yes, as a millennial, I hate saying that term, but nevertheless, it's truth. I read this as a Libby audio read by Robin Miles, which I definitely think is the way to go because of the like language that's used. Like, there's a lot of Creole speech in here that would be hard to read on paper, and just much better as like an oral history. It's also very short, 4 hours long. Yeah, I just find that audio is the way to go for this, to hear Cudjoe's voice. And what this book is basically a primary source of the Clotilda nonfic book that I read in May. And someone commented in my May wrap-up video that Barracon is like a must-read supplement to The Last Slave Ship. So I did. Thank you so much. You're completely right. That is a completely correct statement. And I never heard of this before. I mean, I never heard of Clotilda, the ship, before reading either of these books. And Barracon itself, I just feel it is a gift to humankind that we have this firsthand account of a former African slave, like from Africa, and his life following freedom. It gave me way more context between like the cultural and social tensions between like former slave Black people with freed Black people with African Black people in America, which is like probably the most interesting subplot in the Gilded Age season 3 right now. Yeah, I don't necessarily find Peggy to be the most compelling character. Of course, everybody watches The Gilded Age for Carrie Coon and Morgan Spector. I love that Morgan Spector works out as hard as he does just to cover it all up in those period costumes. But Barracon, I'm just so happy to finally know about this incredibly little-known facet of history, of American history. And it's incredible that you really don't need to dig far for evidence of human cruelty, despicable nature that we have. There's so much effort being made to cover up the tracks of such evil. Like, if you don't know about Clotilda, the slave ship, it was the last ship to hold African slaves in its cargo, 50 years past slavery being made illegal after emancipation. And then this book in itself, it took 70 years post being written to be published. So much effort to cover the tracks, but it's all there. You just have to know about it. And I'm going to whiplash you by talking really quickly about The Really Dead Wives of New Jersey by Astred Doll, who is Anna Dorn in pen name form. Astred Doll is the character name from her most recent book, I think, Perfume and Pain. I'm not a big Real Housewives watcher or fan by any means, and which this book is obviously parodying, but I will say that it began slow. I wanted to blow it off as reality TV drivel. Until about 40% of the way in, I would say this started getting good, which is how they get you with the tried and true formula. And overall, I was just very delightfully entertained and reminded of how good Anna Dorn is at spinning story. Fun. Great beach read pick. Footage first, Eden said, shoving Caleb off her. Feelings never. I read Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, which was written by Elizabeth Taylor, the writer, not the actor, which, as far as I'm concerned, is her full name. I have this lovely Virago Modern Classics, not cloth bound, but hardbound wallpaper design series cover. And I can't believe that I read this expecting it to be a cozy British woman writer comfort read about, British geriatrics. It is not. Let me just tell you now, if that is also what preconception you might have for this book, it is not that at all. I went to this, turning to this for comfort post Butcher's Crossing. Very bad move on my part. It is about an old widowed woman who is alone with no friends, no family. To visit her, all the other olds in her hotel/nursing home gossip about her behind her back. Plus, she sprains her ankle. And just the cruelty of keeping up appearances. Yeah, the gall of me to look to this for comfort. I should have known better. This is my first Elizabeth Taylor. I love this. She is so vicious in her Black humor. I lulled at people's misfortune, at Mrs. Palfrey skedaddling her Livray nephew out of the hotel. The idea of a memorial service being a treat, equivalent to a wedding in more youthful times. The indignity of the idea of a modest cheese party in the middle of nowhere. I still don't know where Ipswich is. We're born alone, we die alone. That's what this book is about. It's great. Of course, it's nice to be given a treat, but not if it's always that way around. And lastly, and bestly, IMO. I read Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. This I've just been meaning to read ever since I finally got around to reading Stoner last year, and I saw that Nathan was reading Butcher's Crossing, and so I just picked it up and started reading this because I wanted to have someone to talk to about this. This is such a Western in the classic sense, without any of the Hollywood glorification, and I think that's what really made this for me. The driving urge to leave behind human trappings and seek mysterious nature, oneness, commune with fellow other batshit insane people, like-minded souls, whatever their background. Within 20 pages, I knew that this would be a 5-star read for me and that I liked this even more than Stoner, which I also loved. I found this so compulsive, adventurous without being hokey. The roller coaster plot this was. At no point was I ever not at the edge of my seat. The nice, dependable guy who ended up becoming a genocidal fanatic. The nice, soft guy who was the problem all along. And I was just left bereft and thinking to myself, what is my country? What is my Buffalo? What am I fucking up in the name of glory? And the subversive edge is truly what makes this a perfect novel. I love the intros in all of these NYRBs. And in this particular one, it was more or less saying that the reason why Butcher's Crossing is so good is because John Williams is not a red-blooded American gung-ho, yee-haw type of person you would imagine would write the best American Western, and that's precisely why he wrote the best American Western. That is precisely how he could have written the best American Western, and I am in complete agreement in that. I'm still shook by this. I truly was so moved by this book. Like I said, the best books just leave you basically wham bam thank you and leaves you feeling all the feels, having so many more questions than answers, and that's where I am at the moment. A phrase from a lecture by Mr. Emerson that had attended came to him. I become a transparent eyeball, gathered in by field and wood. He was nothing. He saw all. The current of some nameless force circulated through him, and in a way that he could not feel in King's Chapel, in the college rooms, or on the Cambridge streets, he was a part and parcel of God, free and uncontained. Through the trees and across the rolling landscape, he had been able to see a hint of the distant horizon to the west, and there, for an instant, he had beheld somewhat as beautiful as his own undiscovered nature. Yeah, I really love this. Oh my god, I can't believe I did it. I talked about all those books before I lost the light. So, like I said in the intro, that's all I read. That's everything that I read in the month of June. If you have read any of these books, please let me know what you thought about them in the comments. Like The Last Slave Ship and Barracon, if any of these books have like another addendum type of book, please let me know. This was definitely one of the best reading months I've ever had in my life. Not because they were all like 5-star books by any means. You know, like looking back to this list, it's not like I hated any of these books. So maybe I should rescind the statement I was about to make in that variance is the key to enjoyment, but variance, variety. Overall, I just felt incredibly stimulated with all of these reads. It was a real roller coaster of a reading month. Like I was looking to these books for specific emotions. Maybe that's why I'm saying this, because I was looking to these books to feel something that I expected the book to provide, but they surprised me by giving me another experience instead, which I found to be even more delightful. And sometimes that's just what you need at the moment. And currently in July, I am having such a fun time starting the Cazalet Chronicles. I feel like this is an important time in my life. Kind of like when, you know, you're reading something for the first time and you know that this is going to be good and this is going to be like an intrinsic part of your personality. So that's where I'm at. I'm very happy. I hope you're happy. Thank you so much for watching. And I will see you again very soon.